and I'm about to record my weekly show, so glad you can join me live here on Facebook or on YouTube. As always, I'll be taking your questions, I'll be reading your comments, so by all means introduce yourself in the chat, and if I don't react to it immediately, then be sure that after I'm done recording my weekly show, I'll get back to the chat room and we'll continue our conversation. It is today, Friday, the 15th of January. Can you believe that we're already halfway through the first month of 2021? It's insane. These are crazy times. Some interesting developments here in the Netherlands. Our government has stepped down because of an issue that affected thousands and thousands of people that were getting all sorts of fines, and it turns out that government has blundered tremendously. And so in the middle of this pandemic, we have our cabinet stepping down, and we are supposed to have new elections in a few months from now. So I don't think that we'll get like a new formation anytime soon. But it's still a little bit weird that in the middle of this pandemic, we've got this big political instability all of a sudden. And that, of course, is also true for the United States with the new president and the turmoil last week. In the Netherlands, of course, it's not related. The issue that caused the government from stepping down was something that was playing out way before the beginning of the pandemic. Am I excited about Wandavision on Disney Plus? Yes, Ivo, I'm very excited. It is actually already up. You can watch it. I haven't because I'm working today, but I'm definitely going to watch it tonight. And I'm intrigued. Let's put it that way. I'll probably record a reaction video tomorrow. All right. Since we still have some daylight outside, I'm just going to start my show. And it's possible that during the recording, it will get dark outside. I don't know when the sun sets. I think it's around 4:30, if I'm not mistaken. So it will get darker in the room probably, but oh well. Where do I have my show notes? Here it is. So we're going to record the second episode of the new year. Let me go to my jingles. This is... There we go. All right. Good. I have seen the Clone Wars series. Yes, I'm currently watching Star Wars Rebels, which I will talk about during my show. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. Hey there, how are you doing? Welcome back to another episode of my weekly show. I'm Father Roderick, podcasting from the heart of the Netherlands. Beautiful little village called Hooglanderveen. Or in Google pronunciation, Hooglanderveen. And I think we're going to have a blast today. This episode is brought to you by my patrons, and it is a fun community with about 200 members, and I've got a long list of names, and I'm going to do my best to mention these patrons from time to time. So here I just want to mention Eve and Jonathan and Julia. We've got Mary, Matthew, Barb, Chris, Ole, Christian, Gary, Ben, Mary, Carol, Rio, Evan, Dennis, Connie, Jan, Melanie, Galad, Rebecca, Daniel, Ferdinand, William, Edward, Anne, Paul, Christina, Lynn, Kent, Harm, Andrew, and Nadia, Johan, Ralph. And that's just half of the list that I that I have here, so I'll mention some more next week. I'm going to be updating the Patreon page soon with the projects and the perks also for this new year. It's, I think, maybe the most interesting year for the patrons, because I'll be bringing you finally my first international documentaries. And I've thought about this quite a bit. Am I going to post this on YouTube for the world to see? Or am I going to keep it for the patrons? And I decided for the latter. I'm just going to make these documentaries, at least for now, available to my patrons only. So if you want to join that community of monthly supporters and you have a buck to spare, then take a look at patreon.com/Father Roderick.
Do you know what's going on? This is what's happening in your world.
Face it, Catholics rule. We got Boston, South America, the good part of Ireland, and we're making serious inroads in Mozambique, baby.
You've taken your first step into a larger world.
All right. Strange times, lots of things happening in the world. Of course, North America will have a new president about a week from now, and there is still lots of unrest. I'm praying and really hoping that the situation, that everybody will keep calm and that we can start building a future. And when I say we, of course, it's not just the president of the United States. That new president is also going to have consequences for the rest of the world, for foreign politics and whatever. So it's not just an internal American question who is leading the country. I think the entire world is more or less influenced by what's going to happen in the next few weeks. We have also a bit of a political crisis here in the Netherlands. Our cabinet, the government, has stepped down today. This is because of a scandal that came to light over the past few months regarding people that were given all sorts of fines and even criminal prosecution just because they made some mistakes in claiming certain funds or whatever. It's a pretty complicated matter. There is particularly one Catholic politician who has worked for years to bring justice to these are all parents, these are all families that were affected, and for many of them, the way the government treated them caused irreparable damage, and some people even lost their jobs, their homes, and only now the government is taking responsibility for what happened. So we are going to have elections in a few months from now. So, and in the meantime, of course, we've got the pandemic still causing a lot of trouble in my country and all over the world. So at least we have the guarantee that things will stay operational when it comes to the whole pandemic. The policies. The last thing you want is no leadership when we're in such a huge health crisis. Speaking of the pandemic, everybody is still very much afraid of this mutation that is currently taking over the UK and is causing so much extra damage. And so many extra casualties because the infection rates are much higher with this UK variant, and of course there are also some other mutations of the virus in other places of the world. It's probably just a matter of time before that version of the virus starts doing the rounds here in the Netherlands, and I just hope that now that the inoculations have started or the vaccines are being distributed, that at least the most vulnerable people are safe. And I'm thinking specifically of my father and my mom. Both are now in their 80s and extremely vulnerable. My dad is in a nursing home where they go on alert almost on a weekly basis now because someone gets infected. One of the visitors brings the virus inside, and then they have to lock down the entire house. It is really frustrating. And my dad, even though he's a bit more confused than he used to be, still suffers from being isolated like that. My sister brought him a neat little device it's like a webcam system that is on top of his television, and we can call him any time. And so it's using kind of IP connectivity. It's like Skype, but a lot of these conferencing tools that we are using a lot, especially during this pandemic, are way too complicated for people that are suffering from dementia, like my father. So this is a system, we just use an app, we can call him anytime and he can answer or not, but it's completely hassle-free. And it's very cool to see that these solutions are now in reach for almost everyone. Who could have thought that 10 years ago when Skype was still brand new and video calls were an exception. I remember that I was even streaming my podcast back then on Ustream, and I recently downloaded the entire archive of that service, and it's so funny because the videos themselves are tiny. The resolution is like 320 times 240, so it's extremely grainy. But that was kind of what we could afford back then. Our webcams were terrible, of course, but also the bandwidth was nothing compared to what it is now. So it's quite stunning that in the span of 10 years, we can now stream in 4K to the world. It's absolutely fantastic. And especially in these times of where many people live in isolation, having these social tools available to the world is an incredible help in these difficult times. Hope you are safe and healthy as well. I've heard that some of my listeners are currently recovering from an infection or are still being treated for COVID. So I hope everybody will recover. I'm doing a little bit better than last week. I'm experiencing that the planning that I do now. So every day is divided into various sections, and I do take my rest in between the sessions that I work is already helping quite a bit. And also the fact that I go to bed early, wake up early, and it's all extremely consistent is definitely helping me to get stronger. Last Saturday, I think I already mentioned this, I did my first run, which was very hard, but still exhilarating to be able to run again after months and months of hardly being able to walk. So tomorrow, Saturday, I'm going to go out for my second run of the year, and hopefully I'll get stronger and stronger. I'm not there yet, but we're getting there.
How do you not like movies?
They're predictable. Like, the guy gets the girl, and that kid sees dead people, and Darth Vader is Luke's father.
Not liking movies is like not liking puppies.
They're fine. I just get bored and never make it to the end.
You know, you need a movie education. You need a movication. Now I'm gonna give it to you.
So I've been watching a little bit more of Disney Plus lately. Of course, today is the day that I'm recording this. We get the premiere of Wandavision, which is the first Marvel MCU television series that is, or at least the kind of the new series, because they did have the Marvel Universe in S.H.I.E.L.D., and I think there was another series. I haven't seen any of those series yet. I have such a big to-watch list right now. Maybe sometime later this year. But I'm looking forward to WandaVision. The trailers look very quirky, and I think I don't know. We need something to cheer us up. So hopefully it's going to be another hit for Disney. I finally also watched the making of video of the second season of The Mandalorian. So for the first season, they did an entire series. It was like 8 episodes, like roundtable interviews with a lot of people involved. That was okay. It did get a little bit long after a while, and maybe a bit too much made for insiders, because they went over all the technicalities of filming and directing. This year, they chose to do just one big documentary, also with a lot of interviews of the directors and actors. And they give you some very, very cool glimpses of how they filmed things, leaving out most of the information about the last episode with the big reveal at the end. So I still hope that they will do another episode, or maybe a standalone documentary about how they did what they did in that last episode. But it was a very, very cool documentary, and of course what they show you is also going to be of major importance to all the other Star Wars series that are currently, at least live action series that are in development and that we hope to see soon. Now, how do I fill the gap that The Mandalorian has left in terms of new Star Wars input? Well, I finally got around starting to watch and partially rewatch Star Wars Rebels, which is an animated series. It takes place in the time frame of the original trilogy, and it features the main character is called Ezra, which is very cool because my youngest nephew is also called Ezra. So it's from henceforth this will be a Star Wars related name, and it's so cool to have a nephew that is, well, he's not named after a Star Wars character, of course, because Ezra is a person from the Old Testament, but it's cool to have that kind of Star Wars family tie. I'm really curious to see how that story evolves. The first season was not really my cup of tea, a little bit too much geared towards children, and also the animation is a step back, or at least the quality of the animated series is a step back compared to the last season of the Clone Wars. It's only when you see the first season of Star Wars Rebels that you realize how far the Clone Wars has come in that last season. But I've heard that it is getting better over time. I do like the overall artwork, and the characters are kind of refreshing and funny, and the story is still a bit lighthearted. I'm now in the beginning of the second season. I had already watched part or most of the second season, but I just couldn't recall it. Plus, it had a number of references to the Clone Wars series, and I hadn't seen the Clone Wars yet. So I stopped watching at one point. I think at one point... anyway, I won't spoil it. But there is an episode that refers very specifically to the Clone Wars, and that's when I stopped watching. I was like, I first need to watch Clone Wars, otherwise I'm going to be spoiled. And I will get back. I come back to this whenever I finish the Clone Wars. So now I'm picking this up, and I've just seen the episode where they first fight Darth Vader, which is really cool. And then Ezra is like, well, who was this? So dark. It was so cold in the Force. Is he another Imperial officer? And then the other guy says, no, he is a Sith Lord. And it's so cool to see a character within the Star Wars universe who for the first time encounters Darth Vader and experiences the dread that we all felt when we saw Darth Vader for the first time in our lives, in the real world. And I distinctly remember how much that character scared me as a kid. The entrance in the Tentive 4, and him strangling that officer on board, it was just like the scariest guy I'd ever seen. So it's cool to see that somehow integrated, because there's still new generations that have never seen Darth Vader, and so they are a bit like Ezra as well. And then, of course, later on in or somewhere, I think in the first season of Star Wars Rebels, you've got the appearance of Ahsoka, but a much older Ahsoka than in the Clone Wars. And it's funny, now that I've seen the Clone Wars and I'm rewatching the scenes where you have Ahsoka, the older character in Star Wars Rebels actually does resemble much more the real life version that we saw in The Mandalorian second season. So yeah, I was a bit, when I saw the episode in season 2 of The Mandalorian where she appears, I was like, well, she looks so different from the Ahsoka that we knew from the Clone Wars. But I guess I just missed the information from Star Wars Rebels. So I'm having a blast rewatching that, and it's so cool to still have some Star Wars to discover. It's like Star Trek as well. I still haven't finished Deep Space Nine, which, according to many, is still one of the best Star Trek series ever. So there is still a lot for me to discover, and I'm just gonna enjoy that to the fullest in the next couple of weeks or months. I also watched or rewatched an older movie. And the reason was I get a weekly or monthly update of series and films that are leaving Netflix. So you think of Netflix and of these streaming platforms as having this static library, just like your regular book library. They don't throw away books. You can always go back and get it and reread it again. But with the movies, of course, you've got these licenses that are only for a determinate time. And so Netflix keeps booting these older films and series after a while. And in that update, I saw, well, hey, there are 2 movies that I can't remember it. And one was called Along Came a Spider, and it features Morgan Freeman. And I vaguely remember having seen the DVD of that movie, but it's just one of those movies from the 90s. It wasn't a very good movie, but I was just in for something not so complicated. So I rewatched it, and it was interesting. There's a bit of a twist somewhere towards the end, which once the twist was there, I was like, oh, I remember now. Yes, of course. How could I forget? But all in all, a pretty forgettable movie, and also a bit sloppy plot-wise and not very likely. But anyway, it was an interesting watch. And it just reminded me of how young these actors all were. Like Morgan Freeman in the 1990s is still, he's doing all the running himself. And nowadays he just does voiceovers. So it's always a bit of a shock when you realize how much time has passed and how old I am. Actually, I'm not even sure if that movie was from the 90s. Maybe it is. Let me just Google that real quick. Maybe it's from 2000. Oh, it's 2001. Okay, well. And some of the actors you never saw again afterwards. So in these older films, sometimes you see actors that have continued their career afterwards, and sometimes it's just this, oh, I remember that she was super popular back then, and where did she go? So people just completely stop acting. Anyway, so that was my segment about movies and TV shows. We need to talk about stuff happening in the Catholic Church. And there's quite a bit happening.
Catholics rock!
It's time for the Peculiar Bunch. This is the segment where I explain stuff happening in the church, in the Catholic Church, and you may not always understand
Catholics
it.
can be a peculiar bunch. No meat on Friday.
Oh, meat? What do they eat? Light bulbs?
So if you have any questions, if you've ever been wondering about stuff and you just want me to try to give you an answer, let me know. You know how to find me.
Man, you guys got more crazy rules than Blockbuster Video.
Today I want to talk about something in the news from the Vatican that I think for most people just passed under the radar, but it's still pretty consequential and interesting, and I did not see this coming. Pope Francis has changed the code of canon law, which he can do using a Motu Proprio. So that is something that the Pope just by himself decides, I'm going to make this change. Establishing that from now on, 2 ministries that were officially, formally, only reserved to and only available to men are now open to women. It is the ministry of Lector, so that is the person who reads the biblical readings during Mass, and the ministry of Acolyte. So that is someone who serves at the altar, who helps the priest and the deacon to prepare the altar, to carry the candles and all sorts of stuff. And what is so interesting is that this, of course, in many parishes, women already had an active role in the liturgy, and not just as singers or behind the scenes, as it were, but also around the altar. But that was actually an exception. That was just it wasn't a formal ministry. The ministry of Lector and Acolyte were, in the past, always linked to steps towards the ordination. So when you are in seminary and you're studying to become a priest. At one point, after a couple of years, you are instituted a lector, and that there is a formal ceremony with the bishop, and you then are given the mission by the church. So it's about sanctioning someone or tasking someone with an important role in the community and in the liturgy. We were tasked to also read during Mass. And then that was a first step, and it was a big deal, and we celebrated that, because then you knew that, well, hey, we are moving forward towards ordination. And then the second ministry that we received was the ministry of Acolyte. And I've been an altar boy for most of my life, ever since I did my first communion, and I never stopped doing that. So it's not that I wasn't an acolyte, but I was never formally an acolyte. I never received the ministry. So I was doing the tasks of an acolyte, just like younger women or older women are already doing that. But it was always kind of more seen as an unofficial task or unofficial ministry, and so this ritual where the bishop gives you the ministry and tasks you with the service of the altar, that was linked to the ordination. That was also the reason that canon law was stipulating that those two ministries were only available to men, because, well, only men can be ordained deacons and priests. And there's been discussion about this for several years, and there were theologians that were of the opinion that you could not open these ministries to women, because it would create an expectation that the church was moving towards the ordination, so the priestly ordination of women, which is something that the Catholic Church doesn't feel allowed to do. Jesus has never appointed women as his apostles, and so we can only work within the confines of what Jesus did, because our sacraments are linked to what he showed us. And so there's according to the current Catholic theology, there's an intrinsical reason for the fact that we only ordain men to the priesthood. Doesn't want to devalue women, or doesn't want to convey that women are inferior to men, but it's just a different tasks or different positions for men and women. However, linking the ministry of lector and acolyte to ordination was something that came from, let's say, the Church, the Catholic Code of Canon Law before the reforms in the 60s and 70s, before Vatican II. And there were even more moments in the road to the priesthood. You were also ordained a subdeacon, etc. So there were all sorts of small rituals to kind of mark the different phases toward in the progression towards the priesthood. But that was more something that was convenient, but it was not intrinsically linked to the ministry of reading. The fact is that any bishop, even before last week, could appoint men to be a lector or an acolyte that had no intention whatsoever to become a priest or to be ordained. Married man could also receive these ministries. So this is the reason that Pope Francis has said, well, maybe traditionally this was linked to the progression towards the priesthood, but formally it's not. This is just a very important ministry in the liturgy of the Church. I want this to be open to men and women, and this connection to the priesthood that is not exclusive. These will still be ministries that you receive on the road to the priesthood, but it doesn't mean that if you are a lector and acolyte, you're necessarily going to become a priest, because that was already not the case. The Pope only changed one word, the Latin word vir, which means man. He removed that from the paragraph about these ministries, and so now it's anyone, man or women, that can receive this ministry. Now, of course, what remains to be seen is if bishops are going to do this on a large scale. I remember that I think 2 years ago, we made a request to my bishop that he would grant a few people from our community to officially receive the ministry of acolyte. We wanted to have some kind of professional, trained acolytes that could help with especially the more complicated liturgies, etc. And we felt that, well, this is such an important task that warrants an official appointment, and maybe the bishop would like to come over and institute some of those acolytes. And he didn't want to. And we got a reaction from the diocese saying, well, no, the bishop wants to reserve this for candidates to the priesthood. So we don't do official acolytes. And I remember that when I got that reaction, I was like, okay, that is, of course, the bishop can decide to do that. But I don't think this is what canon law actually wants us to do. Again, because it's not intrinsically linked to the priesthood. So I didn't understand. I still don't understand why they refused to institute these formal acolytes in the parish. Maybe because of this new Motu Proprio by Pope Francis. Maybe bishops will be a little bit more willing to follow up on that. For me, the reason that we made that formal request was that we wanted to give people in the parish a certain identity. Like, it's much easier to motivate people to receive training and also to deepen their faith if you give them a task. You can link that to, you can become an official lector and an official acolyte. But we're going to form you. We're going to prepare you for that, and that, of course, would only benefit the laity in our parishes, and would give us people that could, in turn, also play a role in the formation of other people that are active in the liturgy. So, interesting development. Nothing too revolutionary. But I think this is I think not that my opinion matters, but I'm glad that the Pope decided to do this. And it's just another way to make sure that we involve as many people as possible in the life of the Church, men and women.
When did you become an expert in thermonuclear astrophysics?
Last night. The packet. The extraction theory papers. Am I the only one who did the reading?
So I finished the book that I mentioned last week that I was reading, the science fiction novel called Winter World. It is the first of, I think, a trilogy by a writer called A.G. Riddle. It's a story of a scientist, a technician, and an astronaut, a female astronaut, that through all sorts of events, most of which are pretty unlikely, get together on a mission to destroy an alien ship that is threatening the Earth. And I think I called it like popcorn science fiction last week. Now that I've finished the first book, I would say it's not the best popcorn. Let's put it that way. The more the book advances, the more pretentious it becomes, but also it's so lazy in terms of plot development. Everything that happens is so convenient. Like, at one point, they're back on Earth. And then, of course, the aliens are still there. And so what do? Well, we'll just take another rocket and fly towards the sun. So apparently, these alien ships are hurling towards the sun at an incredible speed. But then, so there's this one chapter and it ends with, okay, let's go. We're going back into space. And we are the only people, for some reason, and they're the only people that can do this. And you're like, okay, but probably NASA and the rest of the world has people that are overqualified for this mission. So why do these two people get the chance? And why only these two people? Life on Earth depends on this. And you just send these two random people that are also happen to be in love, which is another, part of the book that is so clunky, unlikely. So why do you fall in love with this guy? Well, just because the book tells us to fall in love. There is nothing that these people have in common. So the one chapter ends with, okay, let's go back and let's see if we can do something about these aliens. The next chapter, so we're in space approaching this spaceship. And it's like, what the? You just skipped an entire chapter explaining how they got back in space and how can they even organize to get you in space in this time span of a few days. And then not only are they recontacting the aliens, but apparently they also have tons of equipment that they can use to launch nuclear warheads. It's it's just so disappointing. And then I'm just gonna spoil what's happening because I don't think this is worth your time reading. But at one point, they do make first contact with the aliens. And then the aliens reveal, and this is the kind of what the book is working towards, like the big reveals. Why are you causing this long winter on Earth? And what is happening? And then the alien, or whatever it is this entity, is like, well, we're going to reveal you the next step for humanity. This is all part of a much bigger plan, and humanity is evolving. And then it describes the next step. So what is superior to the kind of life that we currently live here on Earth? And then what the aliens present us as the next big thing in human existence, I'm like, well, why on earth is that considered to be the next step? This is like 10 steps back in time, backwards. There's no appeal to this. There's no reason for this. There's no logic to this. This is rubbish. Oh, wow. Okay, another 10 hours that I will never get back. You know what this reminded me of? Remember, I think it's called Artemis, which was the novel. It's not a sequel, but it's not Artemis. The Ready Player One, right? Which is a fantastic book, and there's now a sequel to the book, was Ready Player 2. Apparently, it's not that good. Ernest Cline wrote that book, but then after the success of Ready Player One, he wanted to write another novel, kind of in the same vein, appealing to geeks. And I was super interested because I loved Ready Player One so much. And so he wrote, in 2015, he wrote Armada. And I bought it the day it came out, read it in the week following, and I was so disappointed. It was so a nothing burger, really. and the plot was very similar to this book. It was also like there is this, I think, a moon or something like that, and there's this alien intelligence, and so they've been training people in secret using video games, and it was so unlikely and so crazy, the plot, and not crazy in a good way. It's like, oh, come on. Take us more seriously as readers. This is ridiculous. And apparently Steven Spielberg had already commissioned this or gotten the rights to this book, even without reading it, without knowing what it was going to be about, in order to make it into a movie. But I'm thinking, oh, Spielberg, when he read that book, he must have thought, oh my gosh, I can't believe I paid millions for the rights to this story. It is just so subpar. Anyway, am I going to read the other two books in the trilogy? Maybe. It's an easy read. So it's kind of pulpy science fiction. So maybe if I'm in the mood and I have nothing more intelligent to read. In the meantime, I welcome your suggestions for good science fiction. Now, please, I know Dune, yes. I know Asimov. But something maybe a little bit more modern and kind of up to date, because I'm still struggling with Dune. It's maybe I'll just wait for the movie and then read the book. I don't know. I'm just lazy.
The scientifically wonderful world of science.
What sort of science?
Welcome back,
science friend.
This is my science segment, and I've got a couple of cool things that I read this week, and I just wanted to talk about it here. Remember the Curiosity rover that was sent to Mars to make pretty pictures and do lots of research? Well, this thing has been on Mars for 3,000 days now. That's insane. And to celebrate its 3,000th daily birthday, the Curiosity rover sent over a beautiful photo. It's a panorama based on, I think, about 150 individual photos that they stitched together. And it shows the Martian landscape. And in the forefront, and that makes the photo so beautiful. So in the background, you see these hazy hills, and it almost looks like something that was painted for a movie or something like that. And then in the foreground, a lot of the pictures that we saw in the photos that were taken by these rovers are kind of boring. It's just flat and some rocks in the foreground, and you've got this fisheye distortion of the photo. And oftentimes they were just traveling over landscapes that were flat, of course, because these rovers cannot really navigate mountains or anything. So they're usually on flat surfaces. But this photo is very cool because in the distance you see these mountains, and in the foreground there are some sediments. There are rocks that are formed by water, and they're thousands of years old. And you see these layers, and it's so cool to see that kind of geological formations in photos, because you realize I'm watching something. There used to be water here on this planet, and to see that, not just like theoretical proof that there was once water, but you see it in the photos. Like, this kind of formation can only be made thanks to water. Awesome photo. I'll link to it in the show notes. Second piece of news, also from space, had to do with wine, and not just wine, but French Bordeaux. So one of the best, most appreciated types of wine was involved in a research mission to the International Space Station. So they brought wine and also vines of certain types of grapes into space, kept it there for a while, and then they brought it back to Earth. And they're currently going to do some research on what happened with the wine, with the ripening of the wine, and also with the vines that they send up there. And the reason is that, according to the scientists that have that came up with this idea, wine is very dependent on the climate, right? And we all know the climate is changing very rapidly. And so the vines, the plants themselves, apparently have gone through very rapid evolutions over the centuries to constantly adapt to the changing climate in France or in other parts of the world. And because there is such a quick evolution, it gives you like a compact version of what the rest of nature is doing and how nature is reacting to climate change. And so, according to these scientists, being in a weightless environment is the ultimate stress test. So plants, of course, are not meant to grow in space without gravity. And so they want to see how these little plants have been evolving in space, in weightlessness, to hopefully then deduct some knowledge about how nature in general and plants and trees are maybe adapting to climate change. And so anyway, I don't have the details, but I just thought it was a stunt, just send up a couple of bottles of wine into space and then bring them back and sell them for tens of thousands of dollars for a charity. But no. This was a scientific experiment. That must have been so hard for the astronauts up there. They're drinking all their protein drinks every day, and the food cannot be too good up there. And then to have that, nice quality French wine in space with you, and then you have to send it back and you cannot have a glass. It's a good thing there were no French astronauts on board, because otherwise I think there would have been a major problem in in the execution of the test. Oh, but yes, we opened the bottle because, of course, we have to do quality control. Very important. And as French astronauts, of course, we are the best in quality control. Unfortunately, there's no more wine left. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about was an awesome, cool AI article that I read about fish, robotic fish. Now, that is nothing new. Technicians have been developing artificial fish for a couple of years now. And if you look for videos on YouTube, you see some very, very cool examples of robotic fish behaving and swimming like real fish. The motion, apparently, of fish is pretty easy to mimic. Plus, of course, it's in the water, so you don't have... The gravity is not as much a problem with propulsion as it is with, biped or quadruped. I don't know. Robots with 4 legs. But what is new is that in this particular experiment, they created a number of fish with LED lights that can see each other. And they equipped each fish with artificial intelligence able to make autonomous decisions on where to swim and how to join the other fish in the tank. And what they discovered is that with the program that they gave these fish, their behavior starts to mimic schools of fish. Where every fish, there is no leader in a school, right? There's not one super fish that will say, okay, now let's all turn to the right. No, these fish are swimming together in schools, and there is swarm behavior where every member of the swarm will make decisions based on what their neighbors are doing. And so you get, sometimes you see that in the evening with birds that are flying around in these huge swarms. I remember in Rome, was oftentimes in the evening spectacular to see these birds making all sorts of strange patterns and moving so fast and regrouping and dispersing, and all of a sudden they would all land and then they will fly up again. These robot fish apparently are able to mimic exactly that behavior. And there is a YouTube video, again, I'll link to it in the show notes, on Tridio.com. Or no, actually, we're posting this on FatherRoderick.com. So go to FatherRoderick.com, and there's a list of links in every episode. And also, by the way, if you're watching this on YouTube, if you go to the comments, there is also a list with the same links, as well as chapter divisions. It's something new that we're adding, so that you can easily jump to whatever segment of the show you want to check out. So this video shows that these schools of fish, of artificial fish, are also able to do simple tasks like finding a light. So there may be just one light source in the tank, and the fish are programmed in such a way that they have to look for that light source and then swim around it, forming a circle. Now, what makes this so interesting is that this swarm behavior is something that you can't do with just one individual robot. And the swarm behavior itself can create possibilities that you can't realize with just one robot. So apparently these swarms can do things together, like finding someone who is drowning, for instance, and then helping that person. What makes this so interesting is that there doesn't have to be leadership in the group. There doesn't have to be a programmer who is sending signals or missions to these fish. They're completely autonomous, and yet they can still, working together, solve problems. And so this is going to be, in the future, opening up a whole bunch of possibilities for robotic research in situations where you can't have a physical or a data connection. If there's no GPS, there's no... I mean, if these fish are swimming around in the ocean deep down below, you cannot always communicate directly with these robots, but they can communicate amongst each other. And I assume that the artificial intelligence will evolve even more over time. They'll still be able to get stuff done, even if there's no input from up above. Fascinating stuff. Really, really cool. And in the video, you see about 6 or 8 fish swimming around, and you see their lights. They have these blue LEDs, so you can see their movement, and it is pretty stunning to see that their movement indeed resembles real fish. Uncanny.
We are on the cutting edge of technology.
Wow. Well, what does that mean?
Let's plug it in. It's going to say, hey, I see you plugged in a new device, and it's going to load in the appropriate drivers. You'll notice that this scanner build... Whoa.
Well, all your technology stuff just ends in disaster.
But there is one more thing.
It's the tech segment, and I guess the robotic fish may have been part of this tech section as well. But it's science and technology. I've been playing around a little bit more with my Google infrastructure here in the house. I have the smart devices, the Google Nest, and I recently purchased 2 more of those Nest hubs. So little screens. They're about the size of a big tablet, or actually a big phone or small tablet. But they can't do that much. And at first I was like, well, why would I buy that? But then I had the bigger hub in the kitchen, which has a camera, has really good audio, and I use that all the time. And I've also installed a lot of these Philips Hue lights all over the place. So I can switch on the lights just by giving commands to my Google Nest devices. And I can also program certain light schemes. So in the morning, I turn everything to daylight. So it's this color of light that triggers the production of stimulants in the brain. So the color of light actually has an impact, has a proven biochemical effect on how you feel. So in the morning, the light is very white color, just like sunlight. And then in the evening, I do the opposite. I turn the lights to almost orange, so it's less invasive, and it helps me to calm down and to get ready for bed. And then when in the night, during the night, I've got a remote switch, and if I press that, it will just put the lights on 10%, so I can find my way through the house if I need to get up. But it's got, for instance, a kind of a bluish color that resembles the moon. So I'm really excited about all these possibilities of setting up these various color schemes throughout the day and throughout the night. But I'd been playing around with it. I'd been moving these bulbs from room to room, and so I finally found some time to reset all the lights and reprogram everything. And now I'm using these smaller Nest hubs next to the computers where I work. So I've got my editing computer and podcasting computer here down the stairs. So I just installed this little screen here on the left, and it has no camera, but it still is able to sense if I'm near it or not. And I think it uses audio to do that. So if I walk away, it will automatically dim the screen. And you can, I think, even trigger some other actions if you're not in front of that screen. And I had no idea that it could do that. I knew that from the bigger Nest hub in the kitchen that it could do that because it has a camera. So I was like, okay, it's just switching on. It even recognizes my face. So it presents me with, for instance, the first calendar items on the screen without me asking. But then I noticed, and I had another one near the computer in my bedroom, which is kind of my hobby computer. And I noticed in the morning when I woke up and I walked towards the desk, the screen would come up and it would, give me the weather forecast and even display some icons that I could press to activate, play some music and activate the lights, etc. So that's when I realized, oh, wait a minute, this device can actually see me using sound waves. That is so cool. And also, in a certain way, it is, more robust from a privacy point of view. Because if I wake up and I have not taking it, I'm not dressed yet, and my hair is, well, I don't have hair that's all over the place because I don't have that much hair. But anyway, my morning face is not what you want to have on camera. Let's put it that way. So this device being able to sense that I'm there and politely offer me some options without taking a picture of my face, that is actually a very good thing. I'm really excited about that. Anyway, it's fun. And I also discovered that they keep adding new abilities to these smart devices. And I only noticed when I was reconfiguring everything that it offered me an option to detect whether I was home or not. So apparently it uses, if I allow it, of course, my phone to detect if I'm still in a certain radius around the house and the church. So if I go beyond, let's say, 500, 600 meters, I can program it in such a way that it, for instance, turns off all the lights, or it turns down the heating. Now, I don't have smart heating system here. I've been asking for some advice, but since I don't know if I can, if they will allow me to stay in this rectory in the next foreseeable future, I have not installed any of that. But I will, if I can stay here, I will definitely link the heating system to the smart equipment as well, because that can save a ton of energy. If I go out for a walk or a run, for instance, and I forget to turn down the temperature, it could just see that, hey, he's out of the action radius, so he's in outer space now. We can just dim the lights and lower the temperature, or the opposite. It can also, when I, for instance, go on a trip or anything, maybe I want some lights to switch on, especially when evening falls, so that potential burglars will notice that, hey, there is, this is not an abandoned house. We need to skip this. So I don't know. It's fascinating to discover how much it can do. I'm still trying to figure out how to pair these speakers. I know that you can use these smaller Nest Minis and set them up as speaker pairs, just like what Apple can do with their speakers. But apparently that doesn't work, for instance, if you have like a Nest hub with a screen plus just an audio Nest device. It can't use those two speakers in stereo for some reason, which is kind of beyond me. Why not? And it feels like such a waste of money and technology to put two of those speaker devices in one room. And the audio is not going to be anything like real speakers anyway. So still working on figuring out what it can do and what it can't do, but I'm using it more and more, and it's only the beginning, which may be scary also, because at one point is the computer is Google going to make decisions that I don't want to have? I don't want them to make, like Dave, why did you leave the house without notifying me? The next time you want to go out for a run, I'm going to lock the door. I need you to be here with me. Ooh, scary. Anyway, another cool tech thing, or actually AI-related thing, is an app that I discovered. It's kind of starting to go viral right now. And it uses AI, artificial intelligence, to create paintings in different styles on the basis of a selfie. And it is scary. It is really weird. So you upload a selfie, it will analyze it, and then it will do, like, I guess this is done with deep learning. It creates portraits of you, but then in the style of, I don't know, a French artists in the 17th century, and it has a ton of different filters, and every portrait looks different. Now, a lot of these portraits don't look like me at all. And of course, it shows the same kind of face, but then it gives me a mustache, it changes my eyes, the mouth is very different, the face is much smaller. I've got a pretty square head. And apparently the kind of paintings that it tries to emulate are based on, I don't know, people that are a lot thinner than I am and don't have a square face. So I'm like, that doesn't really look like me. But it's still, it could be a remote cousin or something like that. But it is so interesting to play around with it. I think they're going to make a ton of money because the app is free to download. But after, I think you can try it out for 3 weeks, and then you are invited to sign up for a subscription. I think it's $20 a year, which is, quite expensive. But of course, it kind of the makers hope that you're so excited and you start sharing all these portraits, and that after a short time, after 3 days, you're like, I want to be able to use this on photos of my mom or my friends or my partner, and people will cough up the 20 euros to keep using it. And of course, the end result, I posted a photo or the result, like 3 portraits that it made on the basis of one selfie on my Instagram account. So you can take a look at Father Roderick on Instagram to see for yourself. The free version gives you like this square photo that is instantly shareable. And it reminded me a bit of remember a while ago, I think it was a Snapchat filter that could turn you into an older version of yourself. And that went super viral because everybody wanted to share these funny, creepy photos of themselves, but then, at an old age, not realizing that filter actually was gathering a ton of personal data for a Russian firm or something like that. So you have to always be careful with what data you just give away, because there is no such thing as something that's completely free. You're always paying with something. In this case, I'm probably paying with my own face. Not that my face is not anywhere else on the internet, right? So, yeah. But it's interesting to see how far AI has come. And I have to say, it really looks as if I hired a painter to paint my portrait. And, well, I probably wouldn't pay him because it doesn't look like me, but it still is like something you could see in a museum. I think people are going to have a lot of fun with it. And with that, it is time to wrap things up here on my weekly show. Thank you so much for listening. If you don't have enough and you want to hear me some more, maybe you want to check out my other show. It's called Father Roderick to the Max, which is available to my patrons over at patreon.com/Father Roderick. And this week, I'm going to give you my recipe for mushroom pasta with goat cheese. I will tell you what I learned about goal setting this week. I also talk a little bit about the announcement that Star Wars games in the future will be labeled Lucasfilm games, and they're no longer tied to Electronic Arts anymore. But the ramifications of that decision, I have some opinions, I'll put it that way. I also talk a little bit about Lego and about Ash Wednesday in times of Corona. All that and more in Father Roderick to the Max, available to my patrons on patreon.com/Father Roderick. See you next week. Have a great week. Stay healthy, and God bless. And that's a wrap. Hey, Ivo, I saw the overlays that you made. They look pretty cool. Again, I just didn't have enough time to implement it, and that's always kind of my stumbling block. A lot of things are cool, but I don't have time. We're also trying to figure out some other stuff, because it's possible that in the near future we won't be able to sing anymore. In Protestant churches, they're not allowed to sing because of the UK variant of the coronavirus. So I'm also thinking about maybe implementing, like, you had these videos that you could run even as like layovers over the screen during a live stream. And I was thinking, well, maybe we can add even music in that way, so that we can still have some form of music, despite the fact that there will be no live performers in church. But it's on my list. It's on my list. I apologize for not having, not being able to implement it quickly enough. We can still do 4 singers in Catholic churches, but that may change because, of course, the UK virus is not that dominant yet. But the the chances of infection are so much higher with the UK variant that the Protestant churches have decided preemptively to already stop singing in general in their churches. And I wouldn't be surprised if the Catholic Church would follow suit. Yeah, we definitely need to make an appointment, Ivo. And again, whenever I have some room for this, I'll get in touch with you, and we can look at some options. Jaska said, my autistic son would love the heater to react to his waking up without seeing him at all. Yeah. An older version of yourself. I don't need an app for that. Yeah, you've got reface. Those are scary, where they use the face tracking to put you in movie scenes. I never liked the results of that. It's too creepy. Short Circuit. Yeah, I remember that one. It didn't age well, let me put it that way. Now everybody wants to see my morning face. Hey, for my patrons, the highest tier of my patrons, they get to see my morning face. Can you say hi to Marino and Adam from Croatia? Yes, of course I can do that. Hi. Artificial. That's a good one. How can humans adapt to microgravity? Yeah, you've got the whole bone density thing, which was also in that science fiction book that I talked about. Like everybody is constantly talking about losing bone density. Even when they're only going in space for 3 or 4 weeks, they're like, oh, but we're going to lose bone density and we need to bring along our gym into space. What about the Star Wars Legend novels? I read a lot of those. But since they're not canon anymore, The disappearance of a raven from the Tower of London. Oh, okay. Yeah, isn't that from Neverwhere or the Gaiman novel? I'm not sure. I didn't even know what the news was talking about. What's that raven from the Tower of London? Is it like a real bird or a statue or I don't know. In most parishes, acolytes are exclusively children in the US. Oh, really? Oh, we have tons of adult acolytes. In many parishes, it's the only demographic that is still available for stuff like that. When will you come to Poland? Oh, hopefully sometime soon, when the virus is gone. We've got Hans Johansson from Malmö in Sweden. Also on my travel list. Always nice to see so many people from Poland continuing to following me ever since I did those vlogs in Warsaw, in Krakow. All right. I need to stop working here and I'm going out for a walk. So maybe I'll do some Lego building tonight. But in order to see those Lego streams, you need to hop over to my Lego account, which is doesn't have its own URL yet because I don't have enough subscribers. But if you search in YouTube for Father Roderick Builds, Builds, Father Roderick Builds, you will find my Lego channel. And if you follow the channel, subscribe to the channel, you get notified when I go live there. So you don't get notifications if you just follow me on this general YouTube account. And, of course, I'm going to watch Wandavision. And I may post a reaction video on my YouTube account tomorrow if I have some time to record it. Marloes found me on social media because of the Camino. Are you going to make another multi-week journey from Oslo to Trondheim? I've never heard of that journey. But yes, I'd love to do another trip like that, another pilgrimage. But it will probably be more in warmer countries, maybe Italy, or I don't know. One of my biggest dreams would be to do a tour of the southern island in New Zealand. That's still going to take a while before it's safe to go there. Yes, I do have a Lego account, yes. It's still very small because I started it, I don't know, right before the pandemic. I did like 2 live streams, and then COVID-19 took over my life and my work. So only now I'm finally ready to go back to that Lego channel. But I want to build it up because I think there's really a huge Lego demographic out there. And I don't want to bother the subscribers to this channel with the Lego stuff because these sessions are usually very long. They're like 2 hours. So if you like long sessions of me talking to the camera, building Lego, and it's very low on entertainment, but according to the people that are watching me, they say this is like ASMR, like the sounds of the clicking of the blocks. It's all very calming. So apparently this is, I didn't plan for that to happen, but apparently some people watch me build Lego buildings because it has a calming effect on them. I don't know. See for yourself. The Olaf journey. Yeah, the Camino was crazy and it's only gotten worse ever since I walked it. So, but Marloes, your name kind of rings a bell. But did I meet you on the Camino, or did you just follow me on the Camino on Facebook? But one of my goals is to do much more traveling. I'm currently working on my China documentary, which is about a trip that I made 8 years ago. And I'm thinking, well, why didn't I ever go back? I'm wasting a lot of time just doing kind of detail work. Now that I have an appointment to do just media work, I can actually go and travel more. And filming and traveling and vlogging, it's just my thing. I did that with audio for 10 years or more with the Catholic Insider. Now I can do it with video. It's even cooler. Oh, okay. So you were walking virtually, like many people back then were following me. So that's another thing. I hope I'm allowed to do this. I would like to take all that footage that I filmed during the Camino at the end of the My TV season and do another 3-part documentary. But I already did like a summary of the journey in one episode a few years ago. So I'm not sure if they allow me to do that. But it was the most amazing thing I've ever done. All right. I need to go, but thanks for stopping